Welcome to today's Legally Speaking podcast, LinkedIn Live. I have two wonderful guests with me today. Please do kindly introduce yourselves.
Neil Handwerker, co-founder and CEO of judicata.
Hi, and I'm Kimberly Fine, co-founder of judicata.
There we go. Well, thank you both so much for joining me today. Let's get into it then. Neil, I'll come to you first. Why did you decide to start Judicata?
Well, it was back in the late '80s. I just say it was that long ago, but I was an associate in a large Wall Street law firm, and I knew after 3 months that I didn't want to do this. I left looking for a non-legal job that would value the fact that I had a law degree. And what I found, Rob, was nothing. Nobody cared. I also couldn't find any search firms back then. It was job ads, the want ads rather. There wasn't any internet or anything like that where you could search opportunities. But you know what? I spoke to a lot of people and I wound up interviewing for these non-legal jobs. And I'll never forget the very first one was at the ad agency Ogilvy and Mather. Now I think it's just known as Ogilvy. And the interviewer asked me, well, like you're a lawyer, what makes you think that you could do this job as an account manager? And I'm like thinking to myself, what I really wanted to say is, this is advertising. It's not like a splitting the atom over here. But what I simply said was, I just completed 3 years of law school, and these are the things that I learned now, Rob, what would be considered the JD skill set: analytical thinking, the ability to spot issues, think and write persuasively, manage huge amounts of data, all of this stuff. And by the end of it, he kind of held up his hands. And then a couple of weeks later, I got a note saying I had gotten the job. And I got these other jobs all because I simply believed that I had this JD skill set that allowed me to do pretty much anything. And that's kind of how I proceeded. So anyway, I had this in the back of my mind. I went on my merry way and had a number of businesses. Immediately prior to starting Judicata, I was a legal headhunter for 15 years. And one theme kept coming up in the last couple of years, and that was the sheer number of lawyers I would approach about moving to another law firm or a law department. They said, I'm not interested in that. But if you have a job in business, a non-legal job in business, I'm very interested. And so many lawyers were telling me that in 2022, the start of 2022, I thought I have to investigate this. And I dug, and what I found was, Rob, not that much had changed from the time I was looking for a non-legal job. It still is the same. If you wake up one day and decide you want to do something else, the vast majority of people are going to say, you're a lawyer, what are you doing? And that was when I reached out to Kim, who was my partner in our first startup, which was 22 years ago.
I
And
love that.
once Kim said she could do it, I knew that we were off to the races.
What a great story, and what a great way to continue that partnership, Kim. So I'd like to come to you next to talk about the overall vision. We've got the sort of why it started there from Neil, but you say no more unhappy lawyers and values. So look out for each other, see the whole person, build bridges, and stay sharp. So what is your sort of inspiration behind this mission and values, and anything else that you would like to build on from what Neil just shared?
Sure, absolutely. So after our first startup, which was executive education, I stayed in the executive education space around legal mostly, right? Because legal touches everything. I spent a number of years at American Lawyer, worked with a number of other entities, a lot of work with boards of directors. But then I also did a lot of work on events with Patrick Krill, who's done all the work around substance use disorder, suicide ideation, anxiety, and depression. So we were sort of in the beginning of really understanding the impacts on the legal industry, directly related actually to the billable hour. And so when Neil brought this idea to me, not only was I thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Neil again, knowing that I might be able to play a small part in providing a path forward, leaning into the JD skill set, but presenting alternatives to brilliant lawyers who, are just maybe ready for a change. And the proof is in the pudding. We have over 100,000 unique users, and we're starting to collect tremendous metrics around the years people tend to consider a pivot, which we're pulling some data. And really, the peak, interestingly, is graduates in 2009, and then it jumps to graduates from 2015 to 2019. So you can see it's that mid level curve, and then whether or not they're going to be elevated to partners. So we're really passionate about it, do a lot of work with the law schools as well as individual lawyers and law firms, and just, being a small part of making a difference in people having more joy in their lives is incredibly fulfilling.
Absolutely, and we fully support that at the Legally Speaking podcast. We're here to try and, we always say our tagline is inspire legal minds, transform legal futures. And clearly, I can see and sense the passion from both yourself and Neil and the great work that you're doing to help people. So, Neil, perhaps we go a layer deeper, if I may, in terms of actually supporting lawyers. How do you go about that and giving them the support to explore a career transition?
Sure. Really, we start with the very basics. We created a diagnostic test for JDs. We really literally hired a team of PhDs in organizational behavior to create this for us. And a JD can take it, a law student or a lawyer, and they will get a printout of the 5 careers that are most closely matched to their own unique background, skill set, work history. So we kind of start with that. Then we have some courses, for instance, financial fluency for lawyers, because so many lawyers who leave the practice of law, unless they're in court, but they really don't know what a balance sheet is or anything like that. So we have courses like that. We have wonderful webinars that Kim has put together called If I Leave the Law. It's a series. So each hour we take a different industry, insurance, communications. We have one coming up, hopefully, on wealth management. All careers that lawyers have traditionally moved into and been successful at. And then we've got coaches. We've got some wellness content. We've got some wonderful inspirational interviews with JDs that have gone on to do all sorts of cool things. And the message is simply, we did it. I did it, rather. You can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love that. You're sort of, you're lifting others and supporting others. And it's very clear that it's a breadth of options as well that you're providing with really good quality content. Kim, I want to come to you on an important point, because I saw on LinkedIn that you're doing something to help the 3Ls that have been impacted by the federal government hiring freeze. So for those who may be less familiar, what is that and how did it all come about? And
Great.
tell us a little bit more.
Yep. Thank you so much for asking, because this is an initiative we are extremely proud of. One of the things, in addition to everything Neil mentioned, is the job board with over 1,000 JD alternative, adjacent, preferred positions, but they all align with the JD skill set. So what we've done in working with the law schools and just putting the information out there is, if a 3L was caught in the crossfire and they had their job rescinded because of the federal government hiring freeze, we are giving them complete run of the site, totally free. Diagnostic, job board, courses, content, totally free. We do have about 25 students that have taken advantage of this, and I've probably personally spoken with about 5 individuals to help them in any way that I can. So we're really, again, proud to just be a small part of the solution and helping support the careers of the 3Ls.
Well, you say a small part. I think, everything you're doing has a big impact,
Yes,
so and if more
yes.
people come together, these small contributions by everybody has huge impacts. And, you're transforming lives, aren't you? Careers and giving people opportunities. So it's very admirable, the work that you and Neil are doing, and particularly with what you're doing, particularly for the 3Ls as well, making things accessible, which again was another thing we were super passionate about League Speaking Podcast, is being sure that the content we share with people is accessible so it can help them at all stages of their careers. Neil, I want to go back just a little bit more of the journey between you both, if I may, because you mentioned at the top, it's the second startup. So
Yes.
tell us about the first startup, and how's this one different to that one, and whatever you feel comfortable sharing. We'd love to hear more of the story.
Sure. The first startup was from the years 1995 to 2000. It was a conference, event, trade show company. At one point, we were doing 300 events around the country. We had newsletters, books, directories, all targeted primarily to lawyers, but also C-suite executives. And we built that on a one small angel investment to start, and we never looked back and wound up selling the company in 2000 to Sylvan Learning Systems, which then was a publicly traded NASDAQ company. So we had kind of completed our mission. Now back then, uh, raising money was a little bit easier, I must be honest. And we only had to start with the one backer, and we never had to look back. Here, it's you're always looking to raise more capital because you're always looking to add more features to your website and kind of keep going and going and going.
Yeah, no, I love that, and I love that it was a success story there, and you already, you wanted to do more, and it was so positive that you've come together to do obviously what you're doing now. Kim, I want to talk about your Above the Law monthly column, because as I understand it, you have a monthly column over there. So tell us more about that and what people can expect from a content perspective.
And really, I do need to direct this back to Neil, because Neil is the one that made the outreach to one of the publishers who's a JD who pivoted. And
Wow.
so he was intrigued by what we were doing. And Neil, this is really Neil's baby. So I'm happy to take more
That's
questions, Rob, but I
that's
really need to turn this one back to Neil.
Well, okay. Well, thanks, Kim. Rob, full disclosure, I had contacted them thinking maybe they might like to be an investor in what we were doing because they certainly would get it.
Yep.
And the guy who, as Kim pointed out, was a former practicing lawyer, wrote back, said, I love what you're doing. We really don't make investments, but what if you guys write for us? And I thought to myself, well, this would be great to write an article for them. And he said, no, not an article. I want you guys to do a monthly column. And that's how it all started. And we spent a lot of time, Rob, trying to come up with the right name. And we settled on The Great Escape, the wonderful Steve McQueen movie. And it's The Great Escape, everything non-legal careers for JDs. And we just had our second article published this month.
And do you know what I love about that story? It's the power of the network. And I know it's overused and it's over, your network because your net worth and all of that. But that is a casing example there of the sort of long tail and the strengths of actually, if you go out there, build connections, have networks, how great opportunities and things come about it. And why I'm personally so passionate about telling people to be active on LinkedIn, to proactively network, go to events, be part of communities, all of this great stuff, because then great things come your way. Okay, Kim,
Well,
I'll
Rob,
try.
I'm sorry, just wanted to add one thing talking
Go for
about
it.
network. The person that I reached out to went to the same law school that I did, Fordham, so I used that as an entree. I'm a non-practicing lawyer. I went to Fordham, you went to Fordham, right away connection. I think that helped.
And again, to the listeners that are probably sick and tired of me saying this, specific is terrific. The more specific you can be with that first
Very
connection,
true.
the more targeted, rapport wins the war. That first message just lands. It just hits with all of that kind of strategic outreach. So yeah, great little nugget in there. Okay, Kim, I'll try another question for you in terms of maybe a podcast interview, because I believe you've just released a recent podcast interview where you were guests on Dean Patty and Robert Aspen's Leading Edge series. So what did you share about ex judicata and helping lawyers and law students, and tell us a bit more about it?
Absolutely. And let me just step back and give Dean Roberts a giant shout out, because St. Mary's Law School and Albany Law School were our beta testers. So
Oh
their
wow.
students ran around ex judicata before we even went live. And Dean Roberts has been just a wonderful advisor, sharing her wisdom, making introductions. She's just a gem. And what do we share about that? We shared that with a number of the law schools, as we know, it ebbs and flows, but there's usually around 197 ABA accredited law schools. About 58 of them are onboarded at ex judicata. And what that means is they can come to the job board complimentary if they're a law student, or years 1 to 3 out. Why 1 to 3? The law schools educated me that years 1 to 3 are when they're trying to pay back loans and things of that nature. So really excited to have partnerships with all the law schools. So we talked a bit about that. Of course, we talked about the 3 Ls, and we talked about the legal marketplace and how it may be shifting. I mean, you can't look at a legal publication without reading something about AI, right? So what will that do to the paradigm of the law firm and the ratio of associates to partners? how will that play out in the future? What other needs will be will create opportunities at the law firms, and really preparing students today for tomorrow, whether it's legal operations, legal technology, project management, and how some of that can be woven into the law school education or be augmented.
I love that. And yeah, it's clear that both of you are getting very, very busy, and very passionate about what you're what you're building. So maybe a question from our communities or my communities to yours. How can people help and support your mission and what you're doing? And are you open to people reaching out?
Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you one of the biggest challenges we have, actually, the biggest challenge we have, put fundraising aside because everyone
Yeah.
has that challenge. The biggest challenge we have is educating the talent acquisition executives as to why a JD is a spectacular hire for a non legal role. So, who gets it, right? A lot of the insurance companies get it, the tax talent acquisition people at accounting firms get it, because those are some of the traditional moves.
Yeah.
But a lot of talent acquisition people don't necessarily understand the JD skill set. So they don't necessarily make that connection as to why a JD would be a great hire for a non-legal job. Right back to where Neil opened it with his opportunities in advertising. So what we've done is through all sorts of research is created lists of talent people that also have their JD because they will understand. So how can somebody help us? If they are looking to hire for a non-legal role and it matches the JD skill set, give us a shot. Or if they know anyone in talent that would understand our vision and the just the importance of the JD skill set and the adaptability, let them know about us. Those are some of the biggest ways that could, be very helpful to us.
Yeah, and I'm just sat here nodding along, through my how many years I've been doing recruiting and legal recruiting within the last decade, and it's trying to get that message across, isn't it? Because people who come from different skill sets, experiences, backgrounds, there's so much value that they can
Yes.
actually transfer into that role,
Yes.
and it's just getting over that sort of this isn't traditional resume that we expect for this role, so it's not
Exactly.
going to work, and it's moving away from tick boxes to actually just experiences and the whole human and the value they can bring. And yeah, I fully support that because I'm a big advocate for diverse talent. I'm a big advocate for
Yes.
law firms that we're recruiting for in the UK and globally to think just because the CV over here doesn't quite tick all of those boxes, please don't just dismiss that, because I think you let a lot of that hidden talent go to waste. So I love that you're championing that, and we absolutely support that from our side. Neil, just as we look to wrap up, is there anything you would like to build on from what Kim just shared there? And perhaps more importantly as well, if our people watching today or listeners want to follow or learn more about Ex Judicata, where can they go to find out more? Feel free to share any websites and any social media handles as well.
Sure. The one thing that I think is so important, because most of your listeners, I'm going to imagine, of course, are lawyers or law students, is the belief in oneself. You had a wonderful episode a couple of, I'm trying to remember when it was, but with David Nagel, and you
Yes.
were talking about you have one life to live. Believe in yourself, and
Yes.
you can make it happen. I remember my very first boss said something like, if you think you're going to succeed, you're right. If you think you're going to fail, you're right. And that at the time didn't mean anything to me, but throughout my life, it just kind of kept coming back to me. And this is what we're all about here. Use your JD, believe in yourself. You can get that non legal job. You just have to focus and believe in yourself.
Really well said. And yeah, David was a fascinating guest, and I'd encourage folks to go and check that out. And I remember before I set up KC Partners, my legal recruiting business, and to the extent Legally Speaking podcast, which is an extension of that, and further down, I wrote on a piece of paper to myself just BTA, believe to achieve. And every day when I was getting rejection after rejection, because we also have to be real about life and business, there is none of this sort of straight line you have to have that self-belief. And one of my favorite quotes of all time is, if it's meant to be, it's up to me. So if you can instill that self-confidence, build that resilience, and just be open to it and have that mindset of you're going to win no matter what, you're going to be hugely successful. Neil, Kim, it's been absolutely brilliant doing this LinkedIn Live with you both today. Love your passion, love your energy. I share lots of the synergies and values and everything you're building. So yeah, if we can help more, please do let us know. Anything either of you'd like to share as a final note before we close today? Kim.
Just thank you so much. And, we are just here to support JDs that are considering or committed to making a career transformation.
Judicata.com.
I was going to just say that. Perfect, Neil.
There we go. That's why you're a dynamic duo. Bang on cue. Well, thank you both so much for today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on a pop-up Legally Speaking podcast, LinkedIn Live. And if you're watching this and you would like to potentially do a LinkedIn Live with us, then please do get in touch. This year, we're really promoting the show and we're trying to push boundaries and collaborate with as many people in the global legal community to share in positive messages to, as I say, inspire legal minds and transform legal futures. But from now, from all of us, over and out. Goodbye.